Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bouhrik, and you can support this podcast with a donation to Compassionate Living. There's a link to our website in the show notes. So, today's guest has found an innovative way to support farmed animals with an interesting business, a business model that supports farmed animal sanctuaries. And we'll be talking with Faik about that in a bit. But first, I do love when activists come up with new innovative ways to get the message out, like Faik has done. And of course, we know that videos, especially videos of the animals themselves, is so powerful. And I was recently introduced to a new investigative technique that I wanted to share with you. And someone was very clever to come up with this. Activists have been putting small, hidden, like camouflaged cameras on the backs of animals, like with a non toxic glue. And they put these cameras on the back of an animal that is in transport to and at the slaughterhouse to see their last moments of life. The video, it's really a very intimate way for the animals to tell their own stories. You can see in the videos like how cramped they are, how dirty they are, how dirty the spaces are, the fear in their eyes. It shows animals in transport trucks and just how scared everyone is, all the animals around them. It had footage of them going down the long chutes in the slaughterhouses, and you're just really right there with the animals. It's intense. The moment of slaughter is kind of obscured. It's hard to make out what's happening. Perhaps that's for the best. It's not super graphic. They actually, I don't know, maybe they edited out any really gory stuff. I'm not sure, but it was powerful enough. You really felt like you were seeing and feeling the moment from the animal's perspective. This video technique was created by an organization called Sentient, not to be confused with Sentient Media that we're more familiar with in the US. This is an organization called Sentient. They are an Israeli based animal rights organization. And I really love it when technology gets used in a way, in a new and innovative way that we haven't seen before. And this is certainly very poignant. It's a poignant project. If you want to learn more, they call it the Camera on Animal Campaign. Not the most innovative name, but certainly an innovative idea and project. So check that out on social media. So, something else that I'd like to share with you before we get into the interview today. I've had a couple of people come to me recently, and they've been concerned that we're backsliding on our progress, on our vegan progress. One mentioned that it seemed like there was a lot of vegan restaurants closing. And also, there's been those reports about the alternative protein space not doing as well as predicted or losing ground. So, I want to address this. I want everyone to remember that this is a marathon. This is a long game. A vegan world is not going to happen overnight, and there's going to be setbacks. Any major societal change usually, not always, but usually happens pretty slowly. So I'll address the restaurants first. So the pandemic was really hard on restaurants in general. So I think restaurants in general are struggling, not only vegan restaurants, but another thing that might be going on is that so many restaurants now have vegan options, really good vegan options. It's not just a dry veggie burger with no cheese and no mayo anymore. Many restaurants now offer even more than one vegan option that are really good on their menu. So people can now go to the restaurant with their family, the same restaurant their family's going to, or go to the restaurant down the street. So they don't have to go across town or to another town to go to that vegan restaurant. Now, I don't have stats on this. I have no idea if this is really what's going on. This is just my kind of hopeful observation as to what might be going on. But I also know that vegan restaurants have been opening since the pandemic as well. So they're not all closing. I'm sure it depends on what area you're in. So don't lose heart. There's still a lot of vegan options out there. Now, about the alternative protein sector and the fluctuations happening there. And what we're talking about here is the Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burger and all those new animal product alternatives, the alternative proteins. Any new sector wide innovation is going to have ups and downs. There was a really strong up, like a lot of interest and a lot of growth happening in the last 5 years or so. And that got us all excited. But that is cooling. And I've heard some business minded folks saying that that's just normal, that that's just the industry kind of leveling out. It isn't the shiny new thing getting all the media attention anymore. So it's just the market adjusting. Electric car sales have slowed down as well, more so than what was predicted. So, the economy is volatile. I just saw, though, that Oscar Mayer was introducing a plant-based hot dog. So new products are still coming out and the sector is still growing. Again, it's a long game. I know that sometimes it feels like 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, but at least there is 1 step forward in that scenario. And when you zoom out and look at the trajectory in decades, we have come so far. I went vegan in 1990, and I can tell you that we have come so far and grown so much since then. So don't lose heart. However, this doesn't mean that we can be complacent. We have to keep fighting. It's not just going to happen on its own. It takes dedicated, compassionate people to stand up, to go vegan, to stay vegan, to ask for the vegan option, to talk to people about why you're an ethical vegan. We have to keep the pressure on so we don't lose any ground when these fluctuations do happen. So try to stay hopeful. I believe that we can and will see a day when no animal suffers at the hands of humans. That is my hope, and I do believe we will get there. Okay, so one of the ways that helps us to get there is out of the box thinking, and our guest today has a business model that is doing just that. So I hope you enjoy today's interview. Here we go. All right. So today on the podcast, we have Faik Bourik. He is a mathematician, physicist, and astronomy college instructor, and a cosmology researcher. Faik combines his academic background with his roles as a professional writer and entrepreneur. Passionate about animal rights and gender equality, he founded Vegius to provide vegan services and support to animal sanctuaries worldwide. Welcome to the podcast, Faik.
Thank you so much, Hope. And I'm very excited for being here. And I have really been looking forward to this opportunity.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I want to start by just getting to know you. So we love to hear about your vegan origin story. Why and when did you go vegan?
I became vegan about 6 years ago. And prior to that, I had been vegetarian for 16 years. I became vegetarian during the first semester of my college career. I came to the United States to pursue college at Cornell University. And on the first semester, I saw animal rights activists tableting. And the concept resonated with me deeply. And I thought that by just not killing animals, that's all that was needed. And I sort of became aware of veganism, but it sounded to me at the time as unnecessarily extreme. So you can see that right away my heart was at the right place, but my understanding wasn't. And I just sort of didn't look any closer into that story again. I accepted my position as a very sound one until about 6 years ago, where I sort of came across some older activists who were talking about the dairy industry, and I looked a little bit deeper. And then I just realized that I really bought into that humane myth, the organic and the free range and this and that. And I realized that those were really marketing tricks more than anything that is organically compassionate. And I just realized that even though my heart had been in the right place, my understanding was not, and they wanted to bring them in alignment. And I realized the only way to do that is to become vegan.
Yeah, that is something that I wanted to ask you about because I've heard you talk about this, that you did kind of buy into the humane hoax that I talk about a lot, that I've, written books about. So you were buying these humanely labeled animal products. Talk more about that. What is it that first steered you in that direction? And then what made you realize that they weren't what you thought they were?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, because as human beings, we are compelled to reduce suffering to whatever degree we are compelled as individuals. And to me, I thought, okay, so I don't have to kill animals, don't eat, in order to eat meat. And if these animals
By
live
going vegetarian, you mean?
absolutely correct. Yeah, absolutely. Then I said there is really nothing with a win-win arrangement where the animals just live their lives and we get some byproducts from them and we actually look for them and care for them in the best possible way. Because I said, okay, so in a factory, a worker works, they do some labor, but they also get a salary they will be able to build a life with. And this is some kind of a parallel sort of arrangement. But as you know, it just isn't. These are just some marketing tricks. And not just that, we end up paying a premium price for the same kind of suffering. It's not only we continue to contribute to suffering, we actually pay top dollar for it.
Yeah.
And so the hoax appeals to our good nature or what's good in our nature, but it is not a solution the way it pretends to be.
Yeah. So how is it that you kind of came to that conclusion? Was it something that you read or saw, or did you just kind of inherently understand or feel that there's just no way that we can humanely farm these animals for these animal products? What is it that really brought you over to the vegan side?
Yeah, absolutely. It was mostly conversations, and like I told you, for my vegetarian conversion, it was instantaneous. The concept of compassion to animals just appealed to me.
Yeah.
And when I grew up in Algeria, meat is just a treat, and that is actually the case in probably the vast majority of the world, or the vast majority of countries in the world. The United States, I don't think people realize meat is so cheap because it's subsidized. And so people eat so much of it. So for me, there wasn't really that much meat in front of me all the time to even think about it. So, and then the moment I was introduced to that conversation, I was like, yeah, absolutely. If I can live without causing the suffering. So I was ready, intellectually and emotionally ready to consider. So, and then I started around the time I became vegan, shortly before actually. Went to some events that had some vegans in them, and they started talking about dairy and everything. It started to open my mind, and I said, okay, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about it. Let me just do a little bit of research. But I certainly started to see that what I had prior to that, the humane myth, is just a gigantic blind spot that I had, and I just accepted that. I accepted that I was wrong. And also, just want to add something. I really, really hate the word humane because it is very absurd that we associate compassion with the most cruel species of all. We humans are responsible for so much cruelty. The fact to think that we are the only kind of animals capable of compassion, that's why use humane as opposed to what? Animalistic. So the concept itself, I mean, it's not only the idea is a hoax, using the term to stand for compassion, I think is absolutely misguided because it's pretty strange because it contrasts it to animalistic. And again, that propagates this idea that humans are in some way uniquely endowed with the capacity to feel high order emotions, which is absolutely incorrect.
Wow, that's an interesting thought. Really agree. I completely agree with you. But I have kind of a different take. I like actually that the word human is inhumane and that we use that so much to say that we're being inhumane, right? Don't be cruel, don't be inhumane, because I hope that people can recognize and say, "Oh, I'm not being human. I'm not being like I should be as a person, as a human. I should be compassionate." So I think it can work kind of the other way as well, that hopefully people will recognize the word human in there and realize that, oh, this is the way we should be. We should be compassionate. We should be humane as human people. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely, absolutely. And all of this, all of these many words are context dependent and context
Yes. Oh,
sensitive.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's true. But language is so important and interesting, you know.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. At some point, probably now, we could continue to use the word humane, but probably think about phasing it out at some point when we reach a critical mass, because it helps. So sometimes words that elucidate meaning obscure meaning when they are overused, because at some point we just continue to think that the capacity for compassion is a categorically human thing. It isn't. It's not true.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah. So you said something interesting that I'd love to kind of pull on that string. You mentioned that you grew up in Algeria
yeah.
and that there was very little meat in your diet. And I think that's something we don't talk about or realize as a Western society, that the majority of the world, most indigenous and non-Western cultures, they're primarily plant-based. I mean, they are primarily plant-based, and there's very little meat, if any. Can you talk a little more about that? I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that if you think about all these cuisines, they are an accumulation of wisdom through trial and error, which is really the core of the scientific method, for a very long time. And people experimented with things and they figured out these amazing formulas that really worked, based on what's available locally. And not just that, I mean, there are certain things that people could export because trade, existed for thousands of years from other parts of the world. And so it's an accumulation of wisdom over a very, very long time. Things are changing now because with the diets are becoming more and more westernized, and people think Western food, McDonald's, and oh, that's cool, it's the American stuff. So that has started to change things a little bit now. But as I said, if you go back and if you look around the world, these traditions, these eating traditions and habits are really methods or formulas that evolved over many, many centuries. And people figured out a way to live sustainably and to live healthily in that environment, because it was very important not to get sick all the time. I mean, for all kinds of reasons. So, and Algeria, of course, is in the Mediterranean. So, quite a bit of the Mediterranean, that the typical Mediterranean diet, grains and all of that and lots of vegetables, and is part of the Algerian diet.
Yeah, traditional wisdom that is ancient and that we've really lost in the West for sure. And interestingly, there's that Netflix show called How to Live to 100 about the blue zones. I
Yep.
don't know if you're familiar with it or you've seen it.
I'm familiar with the concept of the blue zones. The Petaluma in California, Sardinia,
Right,
and
right.
I think it was Nicosia and
Yeah, and
Okinawa.
Costa Rica and Japan. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so there's a Netflix documentary now and it talks about, the food that they're eating, of course, being primarily plant-based and being very traditional, being the
Yeah.
food of, the generations past. I think we're trying to relearn that wisdom. So let's talk about your business called Vegius, and it is to help support animal sanctuaries. Tell us about this project.
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at the landscape and how it is set at the moment, so what do you notice? There is a disconnect. There is a big disconnect. Sanctuaries are driven mostly, I mean, a vegan animal sanctuary is centered around animals, around the idea of supporting, protect animals, providing them with a home, looking after them, caring for them, and educating the public about their plight. At the core of these organizations, usually you find individuals, overwhelmingly women. The majority is overwhelmingly women, very high levels of sensitivity, compassion, resourcefulness, and a breed of human being that's really, really worth supporting. But they are always struggling for resources. And on the other side, you find the thriving vegan marketplace. You know, you see vegan products every other day, new products. But mostly they are that trend is seen as just an economic opportunity, just people jumping in trying to make a buck. So it's just bringing the ethics of capitalism to veganism. Not that they have issues with capitalism or socialism for that matter. I mean, well, like any systems invented by human beings, they have their benefits and they have their dark sides. I mean,
Yeah,
both systems. So
sure.
I'm not in any way making a statement for one against the other,
But we
but
need
just
we
an
need
observation.
vegan ethics in both.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. If I lived in a socialist country, I would have thought of a way of to how to veganize socialism. If I live in a capitalist country, how to
Sure.
veganize capitalism. So and then they really wanted to find an arrangement where those two things coexist and support each other. Initially, I thought of it as a nonprofit, but then I realized that that wasn't the right legal structure. So I launched it as a company, but a company with very profound commitment to sanctuaries in that whatever the company raises, so it functions as an Airbnb and Eventbrite at the moment. Down the road, we are adding more components.
Oh,
And
an
like what
Airbnb, is that what you were saying? Yes.
an Airbnb and
Uh-huh.
Eventbrite. So it's
Yeah.
for a platform for events as well
Mhm.
as stays. But unlike Eventbrite and Airbnb, we give up to 50% to animal sanctuaries as donations without them having to do anything. Well, because the whole idea is that they are overburdened with work and we need to empower them so that they could save more animals as well as educate more people about the need to become vegan.
Okay.
So that's the premise. So that's,
Can I
yeah.
clarify? So it's that someone goes to your site and you can book an Airbnb. Is it only stays at animal sanctuaries or is it just
No,
anywhere?
no,
You've got
anywhere,
a lot of
including animals.
Airbnbs listed.
Correct.
Okay, okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and then
But
for
the
the event part, so you mentioned Eventbrite. So it's like that people can list their events and sell tickets
exactly,
through the
exactly right.
site. I see.
Exactly.
Okay,
And we
okay.
collect the service fee like Eventbrite as well as like Airbnb, but we give 50% of it to animal sanctuaries. So
I
that's the
see.
difference. Yeah.
Okay, okay, fascinating. That's a great business model. Yeah.
So we are going to expand beyond those two components. But the idea here, what's unique about the idea is that we try to embed animal vegan sanctuaries into the vegan economy so that they are powered by the vegan economy that they helped create in the first place.
Mm,
Because if you go to sanctuaries now, well, as more and more people becoming vegan, more and more people are starting sanctuaries, and just there is so much demand for donations that animal sanctuaries are actually struggling at the moment.
yes.
And so this is a solution that is very different than a traditional solution of just a nonprofit asking for money. And we hope that we could make the type of difference in the funding of sanctuaries that they can really focus more of their very precious time and energy to saving precious lives and educating more people. Because you can save only so many animals. The real change is when you make more people vegan, because that way you preemptively save animals by not bringing them into a life of suffering in the first place.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and there are a lot of sanctuaries that do have bed and breakfasts or cabins
Correct.
or something that you can stay on site so that you can be there and have a vacation or some time with the animals.
Exactly right. And then we will be working on expanding our services, all kinds of things. But for now, we're just starting with the simple model of, people pay for their stays. And unlike the other platforms, we donate up to 50% to animal sanctuaries as a donation. So
Wow.
that is the key difference.
Wonderful. And with the event site, can it be both online and in-person
Yeah,
events?
any type of event, in person and online. But one of the things that we are working on once we get the funding is to build a robust ticketing system and the ability to support the events directly in any other way that we can support them.
Yeah, and I would think that there's so many veg fests now and vegan
Exactly.
events and festivals that you could get a lot of people coming to you to host events. So not only are you supporting the sanctuaries, you're also supporting
The
the
movement, exactly right.
Good. All right. The company is Vegius, and we'll
Vicious.
certainly have a link in the show notes for people
Thank you.
to go and check it out. If you have an event that you would like to get some ticketing help with, or if you want to take a vacation and use an Airbnb, certainly
Or
look into them. Yeah.
or also have an Airbnb and would like to list it. And because our list, so hosts are not charged any fees,
Oh,
and we only charge a fee to the visitor. And also our calendar is compatible with that of Airbnb and other platforms, so it would be easy for people to cross list without losing any potential clients.
okay. Wonderful. Great. Well, good luck with all that. What a wonderful
Thank you so
idea.
much.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think more businesses need to this is where, I often say activism is not one thing.
Exactly right.
Activism, yeah, can be so broad and whatever you're interested, whatever your business is, whatever your talents are, they can be applied to vegan advocacy. And you've really, done that here with this entity. That's great.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that was exactly, in fact, the kind of thinking that led me to it, which was I asked myself, what is it that I'm good at that I can contribute? I'm not averse of stepping out of my comfort zone. That's one thing. The other thing is that I can connect things that may seem disconnected to other people, or otherwise saying thinking outside of the box, a few things. And then I decided to just put those in the service of my beliefs. And that's exactly how I was led to this idea.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And I know that you really have a deep connection to sanctuaries. You've spent a lot of time at sanctuaries and
That
Animal
is right.
Place, sanctuary in Sacramento or outside of Sacramento, the area that I used to live in. And I've spent a lot of time at Animal Place as well. Talk to us about the importance of sanctuaries. Why do you feel it is, and I agree that it's a critical component, really, a critical component to the work for animal liberation?
Oh, absolutely. Well, because I think they have this very, very powerful educational component. And one of the most powerful things of making people vegan is actually conversations. And these are people who spend a lot of time, pretty much all of their time around animals, and very compassionate, they're very knowledgeable. Think of them coming more frequently face to face with people. Also, the potential of people being transformed by actually meeting animals and coming face to face with animals. It's very, very powerful. That's
Yeah.
really, really powerful way of changing hearts and minds. I don't think people are going to become vegan because they go to the supermarket and they find some alternative to meat or that's I'm great. I'm very glad those products exist and I really hope they succeed and continue to succeed. But that is really not the point. I really don't think so. I don't think that what makes more people change. I think changing hearts and changing minds really start with encountering animals and those who care for them. And therefore, providing support to that group of people is incredibly important. And that is why it is at the very core of our mission.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people are going to choose that plant-based option if it's convenient, if it's there, but when they are going to actually, seek those things out and be inconvenienced possibly to only choose the vegan option, that's when you've got to touch them on an emotional level and
Exactly.
yeah, and really change who they are, not just their habits, change to being a compassionate person. And I think sanctuaries, like you said, do that so well. They really can evoke emotion, and sometimes people seeing these animals in real time, in real life, it makes it more real, makes it like, oh, okay, this
Yeah,
is an animal that I am affecting, that I am causing suffering to. So it's a very
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
really, really visceral experience
it
to,
is. Yeah.
yeah, to go to a sanctuary.
The most powerful weapon in these structures that exploit animals is invisibility. Animals in modern life have become so separated from people. But before, people live next to animals and see animals every day. So they recognize animals have personalities. And so somebody would say, well, but they still killed animals. They didn't kill them at the level, the speed at which we are doing it today when this sort of industrial exploitation or industrial structures
Yeah.
were introduced, particularly in the 20th century. So what happens is that meat is an abstract thing. So meat, animal, there's no connection. You go to the supermarket, it looks all so nice and wrapped up in plastic and so clean and so lovely. You go pick it up and go home, eat it, and you don't have to think about it. You don't. You don't think, wait a second, this is coming from a sentient being that lived once and suffered. When you are eating at a restaurant, you are not eating chicken, you are eating the flesh of this particular individual, not chicken, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
So that invisibility is a very, very powerful weapon for this structure to continue. And what is the best way to undermine it? Well, is to bring people face to face with animals and give animals a voice and make them a little bit more central in a world that they have been made so marginal so systematically. And if we can change that a little bit, I think it is a huge, huge, huge gain for everybody.
Yeah, really good point. They are so invisible uh,
Yeah,
to us in our modern society, even though they're everywhere. They're just dead and on people's plates and wrapped up in, packaging, like you said. But you're right. What is needed is to actually see those animals, and where can we do that? The sanctuaries. So yeah, really,
yeah,
really good point. Yeah, we've featured sanctuaries on this podcast numerous times and the work that they're doing on sanctuaries. So I really feel strongly about that as well. I think it's a critical, critical part of our movement and how we're going to get to a vegan world. So yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. Very, very critical. And I think it's really the most important component is reintroducing animals to a world that has become so disenchanted and so sterile and so mechanical. Everything is mechanical, including the exploitation of other animals. And it is not surprising to me that wars countries wage on other countries are exactly of the same pattern. Now, people are even thinking about using artificial. They already, in fact, have started using artificial intelligence to decide whether they should kill somebody or not, just based on what the algorithm is telling them. And how did we
mm,
get to that place? How did we get to that place?
wow,
How did we get to that place?
yeah,
I absolutely think that we started it with animals and then it spilled over. It's a spillover. It's our collective karma, and I'm absolute deep believer in the notion of cause and effect. The word was articulated in different wisdom and religious traditions around the world in different ways, karma or divine justice, or there is a lot of truth to that. And I think there is a lot of humility that is to be gained from people that we dismiss as primitive and we lived long ago. I think a little bit of sense of curiosity about animals and a sense of, as I said, enchantment in a world that has become so mechanical and sterile, where death is just a process, is something that could benefit us immensely, particularly in a time where we are sliding deeper and deeper into technologies that we barely even understand. I think that is going to really dwarf, unless we are really careful, is going to really dwarf or whatever is left of our humanity.
Yeah, violence begets violence, and we
absolutely.
have such a violent everyday existence by killing and eating these animals. And you're right, it just permeates into everything. And is it any surprise that we have so many wars in the world? Yeah. So you mentioned something about karma. You talked about karma and cause and effect. And this is something that I find really fascinating and an important concept to bring to the West, because I don't think that we have that so much in Western culture. And from myself studying the Eastern traditions, this concept of karma, I think, is just so beautiful, really. It's like cosmic justice. I think that what we do, every action we take, every thought even has consequences. And that is what karma is. This is, of course, so important in our lives, in our daily lives, and how we live our lives, what we do. And there's ways that, we act and don't think about the consequences. So karma really brings you into this awareness of your actions and that your actions could have consequences. And of course, in Eastern traditions, they believe very much in reincarnation, and it has to do with your future lives, how you're born into this life again, the karmic conditions that you had from your past life. So, but even beyond that, everything has a reaction, even in this life, with the environment. And if we are eating animals, affecting animals, then that is going to affect us in ways that we may not even be able to foresee. Talking about violence and the environment and all of that. So I think karma is this really important and interesting concept. I wonder if you had any thoughts about karma.
Oh, absolutely. So for me, I use it in the sense of talking about the universe as an ordered place. There is cause and effect.
Yeah.
There is such a thing as a cause, there is such a thing as effect. And aside from its Hindu and Buddhist metaphysical underpinnings about the cycle of life, in the sense of people live multiple lives or infinite number of lives until, like in Buddhism, there is a way out, through nirvana. I think about it, for me, when I use it, I use it in the sense that there is such a thing as consequences of things that we do in this lifetime impacts us in this lifetime, or impacts somebody else after we pass, maybe our children, maybe. So things propagate. And when they impact the person, in the sense that they use it, it does not necessarily mean they impact them because they deserve it. No, they impacted them as a cause for something. So I'll give you an example. Europe, World War I, World War II. I think of it as karma, not karma. Don't say it in the sense of, okay, they got what they deserve.
Like they deserve it, right?
No. So, here is, let me tell you what the cause is, and let me tell you what the effect is. The cause was the colonization of the Americas, Africa, Asia. So there is this sort of tacit understanding in Europe that we will do all the dirty work outside of Europe. All the killing is going to happen to the brown people, exotic people in far, far continents. See what happened to the African Americans, See what, for example, I'm from Algeria, a former French colony, where in the 132 years that French started or tried to assert their rule, the result was a death of a third of the population. In Namibia, the Germans killed, I think, about 85% of the population. But there was this idea that, oh, we cannot do this outside of Europe. But here in Europe, the understanding is here is different. Here is home. We're going to be civilized here. Human rights, we're going to do certain kinds of things. But the thing is that Germany, reunified much later than the other ones, was not able to get any colonies in time. And therefore, if they have to get colonies and power, it has to be at the expense of the other ones. Then that brought that kind of destruction back to Europe. And again, I'm not saying that, oh, yes, Europeans, they could exactly do this. Not in that sense at all. But there is something that started. The universe is organized or connected in ways that we human beings cannot assert control on. And if we even go deeper in history, what has led to these wars, or at least gave them their intensity, is the way that violence against animals increased. It was around this time that people invented the concept of the industrial kind of killing of animals. And in fact, there is a book, it's called The Eternal Treblinka. Treblinka is a concentration or a death camp in Germany. Is it Germany or Poland? But under Germany in Europe in World War II. The author, whose family are victims of the Holocaust, is Jewish himself, found a factual connection between the treatment of animals and the Holocaust. So there is a mutation. So things, you create something, you say something, it mutates. So that violence mutated, and then eventually it spilled over. So right now, for example, with these wars, as I said, what did we learn to objectify things? Well, we objectified animals first. Then it's spilled over. So cause and effect. It doesn't mean that I'm saying, oh yeah, it's exactly, I'm not in that sense at all. But anything that we do propagates. The same thing when I create an app that provides this kind of service, provides this kind of compassion, I'm absolutely of the conviction that these actions are going to propagate in time. And then it impacts the collective karma of humans, my personal karma, but also the karma of collective karma. That if we treat animals with compassion, if we venerate their lives, if we think of their lives as something sacred, I absolutely believe that's the key to reintroducing a sense of sacredness about the life of the other, that being person. The disease, the causes of the treatment are in understanding the disease itself. And so in this sense of cause and effect, and that things that happen some far away, in some lands far away, or to some species that's not ours, are absolutely going to propagate, and they're going to mutate and turn into things that we can barely imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the concept. I love feeling that the actions we take, there will be consequences. And also when we look at the world from just a naturalistic scientific viewpoint alone, it seems like, oh, everything's so random and why do bad things happen and all of that. But when you incorporate this karma, there's effects from everyone's actions. You're affecting, like you said, not only yourself, but everyone. There's so many communal and societal effects as well from everything you do that it brings order and order to the universe. And so being as compassionate, as kind as we can, and of course, not causing the suffering of animals is so huge, such a big part of that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think these wisdom traditions belong to all of us. We don't have to be a Buddhist to really appreciate the beauty and genius of Buddhism, or a Christian or a Muslim. All these traditions, all these wisdom traditions, every one of them has its own unique genius. And I think learning from them is extremely important.
Well, I have really enjoyed talking to you. I'm so glad we got to connect.
Thank you so much, Hope. The same. The feeling is mutual.
Yeah, so I do want to ask you, though, our last question. What gives you hope for the future?
The thing that I always say is that I remind myself, and this is actually something that I wrote and as my Facebook status one day. I just woke up in the morning, I had this thought in my mind. Humans are not a great species, but humans are capable of greatness.
Mm.
We are capable of greatness. Yeah, there's all this misery, there is all this suffering that we cause each other, we cause other animals, but there's a lot of beauty. Human beings are complex. Human beings are complex, adaptable, and they're capable of learning. The concept of an animal sanctuary didn't exist decades ago. It exists today. We
Yeah.
have it. The concept of animal sentience as something that's entering the mainstream conversation. It is. Vegan products, alternatives to suffering products, meat and dairy and all of that. So things are changing. We are not helpless. The world sometimes seems to be defined by forces that are beyond our controls, but there are some forces that we can control. And I think it's extremely important to stay grounded, stay compassionate, because everybody is different. Everybody responds to different things differently, to be compassionate, to be optimistic. And at the end of the day, to accept we don't control the outcomes. What we control is the choice to stand for something because it's worth standing for. And I think that is absolutely, absolutely important, regardless of what the outcome is, whether for us individually or collectively for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that we aren't great people, but we have the potential for greatness.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's so true because, oftentimes people see humans as the superior species on the planet. And we do have a power that other animals don't have, but that just means that we have a greater responsibility to make choices that are going to be better for the world, that are going to be better for everyone, for the planet, for the animals. We do have that power. We have the power to change the direction that we're going, and just recognizing that there is that potential for greatness. There is that potential to turn things around. That is hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate all that you're doing for Farm Sanctuaries. We'll have information in the show notes about your business, Vegius, and how people can get involved. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I absolutely look forward to crossing paths with you in the future.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. So please look into Faik's company, Vegius, if you have an Airbnb to list, or if you're traveling and want to stay in an Airbnb, or if you have an event that you need online support for, like listing or ticketing, that kind of thing. We will have a link to Vegius in the show notes. Please remember that compassionate living makes this podcast possible. So when you support compassionate living, you are supporting us. So please make a donation to compassionate living today. You will be supporting not only this podcast, but all the other projects that we have at Compassionate Living. And you can make it a monthly donation by selecting that option when you're donating. Our website link where you can support us will be in the show notes. So, just to touch on what I was talking about in the beginning of this episode, don't lose heart, don't lose hope. If you experience something that makes you doubt if we could ever win for the animals, I get it. I see it every day. I see it every day too. But I also see the progress that we're making, and I see that every day. So try to focus on the positive, have optimism, have hope as much as possible, and live vegan.